50 years ago today, the history of mankind was changed forever.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
As we set foot on another world for the first time. Just over 100 years ago, we developed the first airplane and left the surface of planet Earth. Now we're closer than ever to leaving footprints on another planet. It is in our genetic code to seek and discover new adventures. We are explorers. I'm Damon Scotting, and this is Astronomical. Now, for the most part of human history, we believed that we were at the centre of our universe, and that the moon, planets, sun and stars all orbited around us. But it wasn't until the 16th century when a Polish mathematician named Nicholas Copernicus disproved this idea. He proposed a new model, a heliocentric one in which we were no longer at the centre, but instead the sun was. This solved many problems, including why planets move in a retrograde motion through our night skies. But it wasn't very quickly accepted. It required a lot of evidence to be built up to support it. One of the strongest points was when Galileo discovered Jupiter's 4 largest moons, proof that not all bodies orbit around the Earth. Think of the countless generations that grew up and spent their entire lives believing that we were at the centre of our universe. It was truly a reality-shattering realization. Now, although we weren't at the centre of our solar system, what about the rest of the universe? Were we still at the centre of it, or was that not true either? Up until 100 years ago, we lived in the beautiful ignorance that our galaxy was the full extent of the universe. The millions of stars you were capable of seeing through a telescope were all there is. Then, Edwin Hubble discovered another island of stars that seemed to be very far away. Hubble estimated that they were not within our galaxy, but were in fact 900,000 light years away from us. This was the Andromeda Galaxy. We know today that it is actually a lot closer to 2.5 million light years away, but what Hubble did was expand our horizons further than anyone ever before. Before Copernicus in the 16th century, we imagined ourselves to be at the centre of a universe that ended with the 6,000 or so stars we can see in the night sky. It wasn't until 1924 that Hubble lifted the curtain of our night skies and revealed other galaxies, immense collections of billions and trillions of stars. Based on today's knowledge, we think the universe is 93 billion light years in diameter and contains somewhere in the region of 200 billion trillion stars. But like our ancestors before us, we may be looking at the universe through a microscope. Its true extent may go well beyond our observable universe. Perhaps there may be even multiple universes. The more we explore, the more we discover. Human technological advancements are proceeding at an ever-accelerating rate. At the start of the 20th century, the Wright brothers developed the first airplane and took to our skies for the very first time. A monumental achievement that was to appear practically insignificant just 50 years later. After the Second World War, America and the Soviet Union were going head-to-head in the Cold War. An event that indirectly sparked one of mankind's greatest ever achievements. This was a space race. Each nation was eager to flex their ballistic missile capabilities, which as a result led to the rapid development of spaceflight technology. It seemed as though wars were no longer going to be fought in the trenches, but now instead, the skies high above. Surely whoever controlled the space above our planet would be the most dominant force on Earth. The Russians achieved the first spaceflight milestone by launching Sputnik 1, the first ever satellite, into orbit around the Earth. This caused panic in America, The newspapers were quick to run with the fear that a Russian satellite orbiting above was terrible news for the freedom of their nation. The Americans responded with their own satellite just 4 months later. And they were second place again in 1961, when the Soviet Union launched the first man into space. Cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin. The Americans soon followed, with astronaut Alan Shepard becoming the first American to orbit the Earth. But the humiliation facing the Americans was becoming unbearable. The Soviet Union was winning on all fronts. This failure prompted one of the most powerful and profound speeches ever given in the history of mankind. It would lead us to one of our greatest ever achievements and change the course of history forever.
For we meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. The greater our knowledge increases, the greater our ignorance unfolds. We set sail on this new sea because there is new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people. Can we help decide whether this new ocean will be a sea of peace or a new terrifying theater of war?
Up until this point, President John F. Kennedy had never been a big supporter of America's space ambitions. He'd recently declined a proposal that would land a man on the moon before 1970, deeming it too expensive. But now, due to recent space failures and the embarrassment that was the Bay of Pigs invasion, America needed a win, and it needed a big one. They needed one that would achieve more glory and was more ambitious than anything ever attempted before. The goal now wasn't just to get a man into outer space. It was to land one on the moon.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
The speech resonated not just across America, but the entire world. The goal to land a man on the moon had never been attempted before, and the budget necessary to do so did raise a few eyebrows. But JFK delivered a speech in such a way that ignited the imagination of the entire nation. It is still today one of the most moving and inspiring speeches ever given.
However, I think we're going to do it. And I think that we must pay what needs to be paid. I don't think we ought to waste any money, but I think we ought to do the job. And this will be done in the decade of the 60s. It may be done while some of you are still here at school at this college and university. It will be done during the terms of office of some of the people who sit here on this platform. But it will be done, and it will be done before the end of this decade. And I am delighted that this university is playing a part in putting a man on the moon as part of a great national effort of the United States of America.
Tragically, JFK was assassinated a year later, meaning he would never get to see America finish the path he set them on. The goal to land a man on the moon is still today the most ambitious goal ever set by a nation. It would need plenty of support behind it. America continued on with the mission, regarding it as JFK's legacy. He's still today one of America's most beloved presidents, and this speech is one of the main reasons why. The pressure was now on, to complete one of mankind's most ambitious targets, and to do so before the decade was up. NASA announced a number of programs and missions that would slowly prepare us to land on the moon. However, after a disastrous start to the Apollo program with Apollo 1 that led to the gruesome deaths of all 3 astronauts. The mission was under more scrutiny now than ever. It was going forward at a relentless pace that NASA seemed unable to keep up with. Nevertheless, they kept going, with the next few Apollo missions containing no crew. By Apollo 8, they had a manned crew successfully complete an orbit around the moon before landing back on Earth, achieving one of the most magnificent photos ever taken. This is the Earth rise.
Oh my God, look at that picture over there. There's the Earth coming up. Wow, is that pretty? Hey, don't take that, it's not scheduled. You got a color film, Jim? Hand me a roll of color, quick.
Oh man, that's great. Where is it?
Quick.
11.
Apollo 9 and 10 were the last dress rehearsals that prepared us for the most important mission to date, Apollo 11.
3, 2, 1, 0.
The first mission that would attempt to successfully land a man on the moon and then return them back to Earth.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Command Module pilot Michael Collins were all preparing to make history. Then, on July 16th, 1969, the Saturn V was launched. The most powerful rocket ever built. America held its breath as they began their journey.
Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked. Thank you.
30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drift into the right a little. Down a half. 30 seconds. Forward. Just contact light. Okay, engine stop. ATA at a descent. Mode control both auto. Descent engine command override off. Engine arm off. 413 is in.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Neil Armstrong then wrote himself into history, gaining immortality as he took his first steps on another world. He then uttered some of the most famous words to ever be spoken.
That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind. Beautiful view. Isn't that something? Magnificent sight out here. Magnificent desolation.
Buzz Aldrin joined him on the surface 20 minutes later. The two gathered samples of moon rock and conducted a few experiments before then heading back to the command module and returning to Earth as heroes. JFK's goal had been reached. America's dream had been achieved. Although they were outperformed by the Soviets throughout most of the space race, they had beaten them towards arguably the most ambitious goal, leaving footprints on the moon.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
America didn't stop with Apollo 11. They carried out 6 more subsequent missions, 5 of which were successful. Each new mission was more daring and aspiring than the last. The goal now was to gain more scientific data surrounding the Moon and the Solar System's formation. This is a 3D model of the Apollo 15 landing site.
Tranquility Base here.
One of the main issues that faced the astronauts on these missions was they couldn't venture very far from the lunar module, because the spacesuits they were wearing were very heavy.
The Eagle has landed.
So, in order to get around this problem, on Apollo 15, they introduced the Lunar Rover. As America had reached its goal, the Apollo missions became less and less appealing to the general public, and the funding was cut, meaning the Apollo 17 mission was to be the last. Gene Cernan is, as of today, the last man to walk on the Moon.
99, proceeded, 3, 2, 1, ignition. Right away, Houston. America's challenge of today has forged man's destiny of tomorrow. And as we leave the moon in Taurus Littrow, we leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return, with peace and hope for all mankind. Godspeed to crew of Apollo 17.
The Apollo missions captured the public's imagination like never before. But this is just the beginning of our exploration of space. Do you see that bright star-like object just over there? That's not a star, and it's not a plane either. That is the International Space Station. It's moving at 17,500 miles per hour, and aboard it right now are 9 astronauts. They're moving around the Earth so quickly that in 24 hours they'll see 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets. Every single day. The ISS is a modular space station in low Earth orbit. It is the result of communal efforts from America, Canada, Japan, Russia, and Europe's space programs. Roughly the size of a 6-bedroom house, it is the perfect environment for astronauts to conduct tests on human habitation and how well we adjust to the effects of microgravity, ultimately determining whether or not future missions to other worlds are viable. The International Space Station has never managed to capture the public's imagination quite like the Apollo program did. Nevertheless, the public are becoming increasingly involved with the activities being carried out during these scientific missions. Astronauts often work long, hard days aboard the ISS, but they still generally manage to find time to teach the rest of us about life in space, and how even the most mundane, simple day-to-day tasks that we do here on Earth can prove quite challenging. The long-lasting effects from living in outer space can lead to some very serious health problems. At the moment, astronauts rarely spend more than 6 months in outer space at a time. It is very important to monitor an astronaut's health after they return back from space, in order to ensure there are no long-lasting effects. Setting up a habitat on another world is a long-term goal. We are not quite there yet, but we are moving closer and closer to having the first ever humans live for long periods on another world besides the Earth. At its closest approach, Mars is still 8 months away from us in terms of travelling through space. This presents a number of potential challenges for the crew to deal with alongside the main goal, which would be to explore Mars in greater detail. Although the idea of producing a viable habitat on Mars seems a little out of reach at the moment due to Mars's hostile environment, there are ways in which we could manipulate Mars's atmosphere in order to replicate that on Earth. If we could do so, then Mars may become a suitable second home that is becoming increasingly more necessary given the way we are treating this planet. But the possibilities for new worlds to live on doesn't end there. Although none of the other planets present much chance of settling down and establishing a colony, there are a large number of moons that hold the ingredients that may harbour life. Enceladus and Europa each orbit one of the two largest planets in our solar system, Saturn and Jupiter. These two worlds do have similarities, in that they both have a very large potential for extraterrestrial life being found beneath their icy crust. Now when Europa orbits Jupiter, it does not do so in a perfect circle. Its orbit is slightly squashed, which means there are points when it goes around Jupiter where it's closer and further away. This causes the core of the moon to warm up through a process known as tidal heating. So beneath its frozen icy surface, the oceans of water are being warmed constantly. This makes it an active moon and perhaps the ideal environment in which life could arise. The same applies for Enceladus. Perhaps one day we could live beneath these frozen icy surfaces. Titan is Saturn's largest moon. Much like Earth, it has a thin blue line encircling its atmosphere. This dense, hazy world has remained a mystery to us for a long while. We wondered what lied within the dense atmosphere. So, we sent the Huygens probe to land on the surface and investigate. Now when we landed on Saturn's largest moon, Titan, one of the first things we noticed were the rocks on its surface. These resembled those we'd find on Earth. More specifically, those around a riverbed. This brought us to the same conclusion, that these rocks have been eroded by a body of water. And indeed, the Cassini probe orbiting around Titan discovered very large lakes of liquid methane. Now on Earth, methane is a gas, but when the temperatures are lower, it can become a liquid. And indeed, that is the case on Titan. As the sun reaches the end of its lifetime, it will swell into a red giant, warming the outer reaches of the solar system. The Earth's oceans will be boiled away, but there is a high likelihood that the cold distant moons of our solar system could be warmed to a suitable temperature, allowing us to colonise all of them. One day, we may need to leave our solar system in search of another star that gives us the energy and support we need to continue and further advance as a species. This would require travelling through interstellar space, the space in between stars. If the trips to Mars and other moons seemed long and risky, they are a taste of paradise compared to the extreme conditions of interstellar travel. The distances between stars is incredibly vast. It will not be an easy journey for us to make if we are to ever travel to another solar system. But our desire and relentless curiosity means it is practically inevitable that we will one day venture to other stars. Our knowledge of the universe's true size has grown tremendously in recent times. But there is still nothing to say we fully understand its true extent. With every second, the universe is expanding more and more. But this just simply means there is more space for us to explore. As a species, we are no longer limited to our own skies. The universe calls to us. It awaits our arrival. Exploring our own solar system will be the first steps towards colonizing the galaxy. We are explorers. I'm Damon Scotting, and this was Astronomical. No! Remember when you're growing up and you're watching those cartoons and you see them deal with quicksand and you think, you know what, I'm ready. When it comes to dealing with quicksand in real life, I'll be ready. And then you get older and you think, why did they teach us that? We're never going to need to learn that. Well now I could have really used that information. Okay. Do I leave the boot behind? Oh, I'm so tired. Now this is an actual piece of moon rock. It might not look very special, but this is as old as the solar system itself. I am